everyone, and a big welcome to our Google Maps Platform developers and Discord community members. I'm Ryan Baumann, our head of developer experience at Google Maps Platform, and
I'm Angela Yu, the product manager for developer experience.
And we're super excited today to present our first ever Fireside Chat. We're testing out this new podcast and hoping it turns into a series. So please be sure to take the survey and let us know how we did afterwards. Today's topic is a great conversation about how AI is changing the developer's entire world. We'll share practical tips from building AI-powered tools and explore the future of smart AI-driven applications. Here's a look at what we'll cover today. How AI has completely transformed our developer workflows for vibe coding and automation, which tools we've been using and finding the most success with, and most importantly, thank you. We'll have lots of questions that we'll answer at the end from Discord. So please stay tuned till the end and we'll get to all your questions. Okay, with that, let's talk.
Yeah. So, Ryan, starting with why we're even here today, you and I, as stewards of the developer experience for Google Maps Platform, our jobs have completely transformed in the past year because developers' jobs have changed, especially with the advent of AI. What's the most significant change that you've seen in the developer workflow?
Yeah, I think the biggest change is that you can take an idea and transform that into a working prototype without having to know necessarily what API choice I'm going to make or what framework or language that I'm going to use. You can instead express your intent as an application, and the time that it takes to do that, the number of iterations you can make on that is just incredibly fast. And so that has completely flipped, the amount of software that I write that was stuck in my head as an idea is now all out as prototypes. And I think we're seeing that across the entire developer ecosystem. There's lots more applications being written as at least ideas coming from our heads onto, reality on the screen. So I think we're also seeing that there's lots of new types of users that are building for the first time. That's the other really exciting part about this. It's not just more of the same people creating more software. It's, millions of new people who have never created like a website for the first time are now building their first map or building their first website because the accessibility and ease of use that AI unlocks is completely, different. No-code tools and low-code tools showed a lot of promise in the past, but this is a whole nother level of unlock.
Absolutely. You've been sharing some of your prototypes on LinkedIn. Everyone, go follow Ryan on LinkedIn. He posts a lot. He shares a lot about his experimentation, especially with vibe coding. Tell me about that experience of one of the prototypes you built.
Yeah, one of my favorite prototypes was actually I was at Thanksgiving dinner about 2 months ago, and one of my relatives was asking me about my haircut. And I was like, I really want to grow my hair out a little bit longer, but I don't know what it would look like. I don't know what hairstyles I could use. And then right at that moment, I realized I could probably make a application that would help me see what I would look like in a different haircut, right? And at that point, our Nano Banana model for image generation had just come out, a couple weeks before that. So I was like, you know what? I could probably vibe code this just, as an idea. So I just spoke the idea into my phone in AI Studio. I put it in my pocket and I pulled it out later after dinner, and it had already made a decent prototype. And I just iterated on that a couple of times, and I eventually pulled it into anti-gravity, and I made it more of a fully fledged app, put it on GitHub, and then made a couple of video posts about it. Yeah. But now I actually use that as a demo that I took to the Gemini 3 launch event in San Francisco in December, and it was one of the most popular demos. Everyone loved trying on new hairstyles and being inspired. And so it just unlocks this whole level of creativity and that workflow that you can just go from, I have an idea, to something that maybe I would have made a note about before. Now I have an entire working application. So my GitHub is getting much larger and more active than it ever has been in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's so exciting how many more ideas can see the light of day because of the abilities of vibe coding. And whereas before it would have taken a significant investment for a developer to invest in an idea. And now developers can try so many ideas, see what sticks, see what resonates, and they might be surprised with what actually people respond to, like you were.
Absolutely. And so I know you've been at the heart of building and helping developers create, applications from what's stuck in their head and getting it out on the screen. With your work on, is it Maps Builder Agent? Yeah. Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned, what you were trying to accomplish with Maps Builder Agent, what you learned from working with developers, building an agent to help them?
Yeah. I'd say there are a lot of coding assistants out there that are accelerating people's workflows. They're generalists, and so they can build with maybe the well-known APIs or prototype something that works. But what we wanted to build was bridge a gap between what the generalist coding agents can do today and the expert knowledge that is needed for developing with Google Maps Platform, because we have so many APIs and constantly changing and evolving API surfaces where they've had to spend weeks researching through pages and pages of documentation, learn how to stitch this API together with that API, combine that in the framework or the language that they're familiar with. And all of that can be done much more quickly now with this specialized Maps Builder agent. And then the code that is generated from that can be exported into your preferred IDE or coding environment. Yeah,
I love that you're flipping the script from having to figure out what I want to build to instead, let me come up with a cool idea and then say, oh, I want to go further, and now I can go activate the Flutter application with a Google Maps Platform API key that I needed, but I already know what I'm going to build is worthwhile, right?
Yeah. And the important thing is that we're really trying to reduce friction with this agent, and not just like the friction of research and understanding and learning the API surface, but also even things like getting your API key to insert into the code, or generating a custom map style. All of that, we're breaking down those barriers and shortcutting those workflows so that developers can be productive. Now, what I just learned on my journey of working on Builder Agent is that just getting to a prototype is the first step. But I've collaborated with you and your team on delivering Code Assist MCP, and that was born out of both excitement around the MCP protocol, but also just a need that we saw from the Builder Agent journey. So tell us a little bit more about what motivated you and your team to work on that.
Yeah, great question. So in, I think it was March of 2025, we had Gemini 2.5 Pro came out, and we were all blown away at how well it could, code and vibe code and all that sort of stuff. And so we tried a whole bunch of experiments right off the bat. In fact, I gave a talk in San Francisco. It was Vibe with Maps. And it was right when I think Andrew Kaparthy posted the blog about vibe coding. And I was like, oh, this is cool. It's called Vibe with Maps. It was like a week later. And then it blew up in the next couple of weeks. And I iterated on a whole bunch of different ways that I could do a live demo of making different types of maps with, Gemini 2.5. And we arrived at a solution that was a bunch of static context that you basically loaded into the system prompt, right? And that worked really well. I got some great wow moments and a lot of great ideas from that meetup. And from there, we really realized there's a whole bunch more problems, right? You can make a great first prototype, especially web specific, if you limit it to just, Android or just web or just React in just a couple of products, you can make the agent really capable. But you need it to be capable at vibe coding kind of any type of application. And so that's where we started approaching this problem from how can we combine static context that we put into something like agent instructions, as well as dynamic context that the agent can go find and discover as it needs it for its specific task. And that's where we came up with Code Assist, which is a RAG solution that's accessible over MCP. And with the advent of standards like MCP that all agents started to adopt support for right there in May of 2025, we had an easy way of having lots of users access this service that previously was like a custom integration that you had to do. And so what we've learned through this journey over the past 9 months now is that is a ton of expertise and capability you can unlock in your agent by making it a specialist through context, static and dynamic context that you can provide with lots of different mechanisms. An MCP tool is a really useful mechanism that lots of agents have adopted, but there's more coming. Skills have gotten really popular here in the past couple of months, and we see a combination of skills and MCP unlocking another layer of capabilities and better scalability, so your agent could be an expert both in web development and Android development and Flutter development as you need it for your building journey.
Yeah. So we've introduced a couple of acronyms here. I'm just going to break it down, slow us down for folks who are not familiar. We mentioned RAG, which is Retrieval Augmented Generation. That is because an agent and its LLM have limited context, like from when it was trained. And retrieval means that it can go out and get fresh information from the current world, like what's like a live Google search or a search of our current documentation, what's currently published. And so that augments what the LLM generates in order to improve the answer, make it more accurate, more fresh. And that's delivered over MCP, which is Model Context Protocol. And that is the open standard protocol for delivering on-demand context to LLMs. And so that's, I think, what blew everything up last year, right?
Yeah.
MCP as a protocol that everybody agreed on really quickly. And so I think everyone's just very hungry for an open standard. And that really blew up the innovation because everybody could then publish their MCP way of delivering fresh context to LLMs and agents.
Yes. And, taking a step back, thank you for breaking down there's a lot of tools in this AI space and they change and there's lots of names and acronyms. It's easy just to chase all of the latest and greatest things. It reminds me of the JavaScript, era when there was a new framework and language like every single month. In AI, it's probably that, but, twice as fast. But there's some basic problems that we're solving for here that I think are important to ground on because the technologies and the tools are going to change over time here.
Yeah.
And one is, the broad problem of hallucinations, right? Where the agent or the LLM will come up with a response, but it's not grounded in reality or at least up-to-date information. So you don't want your agent to use an old version of Maps JavaScript API, right? Or it's still using the alpha or beta version for 3D maps when it's been in GA for a while now, right?
Exactly.
So you want it to not hallucinate. You want it to be fresh with the latest and greatest products and platforms so you get the best application. And you also want it to be reliable, efficient. It can self-heal. So as the agent discovers it needs more information, it has a tool to go find it. You're never going to be able to premeditate every single thing. The whole point of agents is that they can do things that you didn't previously architect. So you need a tool that can dynamically go look up the latest API doc and code sample. So that's the problem that we're solving for. The tools that we use to solve for that are changing quite a bit every couple months here. So we've talked about how AI empowers builders and developers, but let's flip that. How are we making it easier and more powerful to build personalized applications where the user it understands me and what I want and the intent that I have and what I've previously done? And how does that change what the responsibility of the builder or developer is?
Yeah. I think about privacy a lot because even just as a user of applications and also as a developer, now we're going beyond prototype that's just spitting out the same experience for every user to actually hooking it up to additional context that is user specific or enterprise specific, and being able to access private information, but in order for that agent or the application to do more for you and be more helpful. So there are several patterns that are really important to incorporate into your application experience. Number one is transparency and explaining full disclosure about why the application is requesting the information, what it's going to do with it, why that access is going to help the application do its job better. And designing privacy in, not just saying like, I want access to all your photos. So I can like tell through process, but actually designing in controls where the user can actually opt in to different degrees of access. I mean, this was also a recurring theme in our Discord questions, was this concern about like, we trust AI more and more to make decisions for us. But as we give it access to more and more of our information, do we trust it to handle that information responsibly? I think Wanta Blue and George Hag on Discord both brought this up of wanting to be able to, as users, control or know what the models are, like especially when we talk about sharing location or location context. In the Google Maps app, there's this concept of location history, which until now has only been available to the user themselves. But what if I'm building something with Google Maps Platform and I wanted to access the user's location history in a third-party app? Would that would that be something that the application can handle responsibly? And does the user know what they're sharing when they give that access? So privacy, building that in, and then also security. I think developers need to understand, more importantly than ever, the security design of their applications, because it can be one idea or one thing to have good intentions, but if you have security holes, then that all goes by the wayside.
With my API key, right? How do I secure that in my vibe-coded application so that I don't get a surprise bill, or that I make sure that somebody hasn't scraped it and it's using it and I don't even know about it? Yeah.
So I think earning user trust through privacy and security design is going to be what actually bubbles up the more successful applications of the future, among kind of the AI slop of like a lot of vibe-coded apps out there. But the ones that are going to earn user trust and actually be adopted are the ones that have thought about privacy and security consideration. Let's say a developer ships an AI-powered feature. How do you measure success or failure? Like it used to be, we had very clear measures of like task success and not, but like what does it look like now to know if it's good or not?
Question. And I'm sure you've seen all the memes about evals fixing everything. But first of all, what is an eval, right? I think about it, especially for, existing builders who have software development experience. It's a unit test or it's an integration test. So it's very analogous to that, but it's not deterministic. So you add the, non-determinism element into it. And I have some experience working with this in, prior parts of my career. So been trying to apply those best practices plus learn a ton from the leaders and practitioners in this space, where you want to design tests for your agent that start from what you want the intended experience to be, as well as looking at real world, what we call traces, like how the agent actually performs with real user questions. And you categorize those things with some human review at first of, oh, that was a good experience, or no, that was not a good experience, right? And here's the failure mode. And some of those things you could break down into tests that actually are deterministic. For example, was a tool call made when the agent, tried to make a tool call? Yes or no? You can make that a binary test. But there's many others that you have to judge, not just an individual step that the agent took, but the actual outcome that it drove over, potentially 10, 20, 30 different turns or different LLM calls that it makes autonomously in that journey, right? And so testing those sorts of systems takes an approach of first having a set of fundamental evals for what your goldens are, or this is how I want my agent to perform. That usually starts with what are the critical user journeys or critical experiences. Write those things down and write down what good looks like. And then you can set up a system to test those things. And the way you can do it in a non-deterministic system is you can use actually other LLMs as judges to review your content as the agent output in comparison to what you wrote as the ideal answer, right? And you can compare those two things, and you can actually start to judge whether or not this is, improving or not improving over time. But there's a lot of new engineering techniques that we are all developing to learn how this is working practically. I've seen a ton of value in both, so for Code Assist, for example, right? We have a set of unit tests that we can think about it as running that ask a whole bunch of different questions to an agent that has access to Code Assist about, how much does this cost? What product should I use for this? Is this product capable of doing this? Ranging from common support questions to common product questions that we want to make sure our documentation really covers well, to coding questions, right? To make sure it can, a React developer can access that new Places UI kit component, right? And that's one level of test that we have, hundreds or even thousands of those unit tests. And we run those very frequently, right? All the time. And then what we've been working on a lot lately is more integration tests that look at, okay, what are the most common questions that a developer would start in a AI Studio build mode with when they're involving a map? Think store locator, e-commerce checkout, real estate exploration, all of those sorts of typical map use cases that usually have a front end component because they're very visual and easy to share and easy to see a great prototype, right? And what we've seen there is that when you connect all of the steps that an agent takes when you ask it to build a store locator in AI Studio, and 5 minutes later it comes back with a fully built application with Google Maps Platform, there's a lot of things you can learn along the way. But if you just judge the output, you can see what the sensitivity of a change is that you made on your product or your code assist or your context to the output. And those things are not directly, you cannot just get to one root cause. There's many different iterations and they have many different things. So I think we're going to end up with a lot of new techniques around evals to statistically evaluate whether or not something is better or worse. And we're going to see a lot of tools that make this really easy. Over time, there's some good open source ones that are available now, but I think we just need a lot of engineers that get experience with building production agents that we can trust using tools and systems like this.
Yeah. I love what you said about using AI to judge AI in the evals from the unit test level. Does that apply to the integration test level? Can we automate completely all of this evaluation of quality?
You can scale. What I've observed so far, and when we're watching this in the future, these assumptions may have continued to progress here. But from what I can tell so far, you can use LLMs and agents to automate the testing and evaluation of tools and systems at scale. But if you don't have a real expert reviewing whether or not that judge is trustworthy, or whether or not the agent is performing well on a task that is maybe unknown to the judge, it's never seen before, it's a failure mode that has never been seen before, those sorts of things are still going to require regular human review. And so I don't see that changing. So the value of the taste that a human has, or a product manager of what they want the experience to be, or a developer relations engineer, or your own product that you're making as the engineer or the designer or the product manager for it, right? It was more important than ever, but you're not going to go, run 1,000 evaluations and judge every single one of them yourself every day. No.
We have one more question from Discord from Jim in Wisconsin. Recently, we've always talked about building applications. Like a lot of Google Maps Platform APIs are built for building apps. But now a lot of builders are thinking about building agents, not just using the off-the-shelf agents, but building their own custom agents. What have you been experimenting with, or what have you been learning in terms of being able to design an agent?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for the question, Jim. I'm also from Wisconsin, so shout out to Wisconsin. University of Wisconsin-Madison is where I went to undergrad. So for what can you what have I been building with agents? I guess, first of all, I've been building a lot of agents to help me understand how good developer experience is, right? So I'm trying to scale myself. And I think that's a good place to start, is take tasks that you know really well yourself. And so you can be the judge effectively. And it also helps you day to day, right? Because you can automate a bunch of tasks that you had previously done, or do tasks that you would previously never have time for, right? So I have basic agents all the time that I'm now experimenting with making into skills in my Gemini CLI, right? That will review my email draft in my voice, and that will audit my, kind of security doc. Big one that I use a lot lately is to draft my presentations. I write the outline and then have the slide draft created from a template, to populate my outline into the slides. That saves me at least an hour or two. And more, a lot of cognitive load that I really hate that blank screen quite a lot.
Yeah. Another practical advice is we've had some interest in Discord about how should builders think about combining Gemini API with Google Maps Platform. I think Ken, one of our teammates, has built something interesting with that, following that pattern. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So if you are building your first agent, and you, of course, are wondering, hey, how can I add, Google Maps to what this agent can reason over and ground on? We have two easy-to-use tools for that, actually. One of them is grounding with Google Maps in Vertex AI. So that if you're building, an enterprise application or you're trying to scale out an application, this is a great tool for you, and it allows you to, have your agent search places from our Places API, right? It allows you to get, actually, I think Places is the main thing that's available through the Vertex AI implementation. And it also allows you to create a interactive response from the agent. So you actually get a map back that shows you the place visually. It can be in 3D, all these really cool user experience elements you can add to the map. And what Ken did with that on our team, he built a entire itinerary planner that you just speak to, because it uses Gemini Live as its model, and it has just a minimal user interface. It's basically just a 3D map, and everything else is audio only. So it speaks back to you, you speak to it, you can interrupt it, it can restart, and it shows you, the itinerary that you planned. I think we did this one for Vegas, and it's now available on AI Studio as a gallery build mode that's really easy to get started with. If you're not building with Gemini, however, we have another offering called Maps Grounding Lite. It's available as an MCP server. So if you're building with Claude or with OpenAI or whatever model you're building your agents with or experimenting with, you can access places search, weather lookups, routing, all of that as tools for your agent.
Yeah. So expanding on Maps Grounding, that actually was hitting on a lot of curiosity on Discord about reasoning about the real world. One of our Discord community members, Chris M, was really seeing the Google strategy here of what if we could combine Google Maps knowledge with business operational knowledge and other real-time real world knowledge. This would be very powerful for helping individuals and businesses make decisions, and that is all possible. And it's just, I think it combines all of those things that we were talking about before, about real world grounding, the on-demand context and expertise, privacy respecting and security respecting design, all of that stack we have available in Google. I think the frustration is learning how to stitch it all together.
Yes.
And for that, I think our team, your team is working on building these demos to show kind of lead the way and show the pattern of how to stitch all of these things together.
And together, we want to make it as easy as possible for you to, experiment, to learn, and to build your first agent and see how you deploy it and how you can use Google Maps Platform as part of that overall experience. And ultimately, we really want to know what kinds of problems and use cases that you can solve for. We're going to focus on making that as easy as possible, making sure you have the raw capability. But from there, the innovation comes from our customers and our developers and our new types of builders that are using Replit, So we really look forward to, what you share with us as, pain points, new use cases, new things you want to showcase on our Discord or on AI Studio.
Yeah, we've talked about AI Studio, Maps Builder Agent, Code Assist, MCP, grounding with Google Maps on Vertex AI, with Gemini API, grounding light. And one other thing that came up in Discord questions, which we haven't talked about, is using AI to reason over real world, say, imagery. And I want to let the community know that we actually already have released product about that called Imagery Insights, and this is part of our Google Maps Platform Analytics suite. And Imagery Insights actually lets you do AI analysis of street view imagery. For example, a city planner or urban planner trying to count the number of street poles in a city or along major roads. That is possible with one of these newer products called Imagery Insights. And then we have similar insights products for reasoning over other data sets that Google holds. So.
Like places and roads, yes, the other two big ones. Yeah.
And then also our Maps data sets allowing customers to import their own data. And that's going back to Chris M's question about combining your own business's operational data with Google Maps data.
Yeah, that's a great way of doing it. You can do it through the Datasets API, like Angela just mentioned, and you could also build your own agent that can use Maps grounding alongside your own enterprise or your own business information, and your agent can combine it.
Yeah. So we have a lot. We have a lot of innovation, and it's not the end. There's a lot more to come. I'd say stay tuned. But I want to wrap this up by saying thank you to all of our innovators who joined Discord for the special event, and thank you for all your questions. We've had a really rich conversation because of it. We'll be posting this recording to our YouTube channel, which is at Google Maps Platform on YouTube as well, very soon. So don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get the announcement. And stay tuned for a brief survey.
Thank you.